Hanging out down the street, the same old thing we did last week. Welcome to As Goes Wisconsin. We are at the end of the week. We made it to our first week of shows, and I think it's actually been pretty good. 2 hours a day, not as intimidating as I thought it would be, but we've made it. And so if you would like to join the party today, we'd love to hear from you. You can call or text in to 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-PARTY. We'd love to hear from you. And joining me today from Green Bay, Wisconsin, she is a union organizer by day, a stand-up comedian by night, and in her copious amounts of extra free time, she also has a podcast about horror movies called Bloody Mary. And she spells her name the correct way. Please welcome my guest co-host for the day, Kristin Lytie. Kristin, how many times does your name get misspelled?
Oh, all the time.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's just unfortunate because I don't know who decided to spell it Kristin with an E because they just hate symmetry.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't understand the the versus tin. So they're not really pronounced differently, but it looks much better with two I's.
I agree. I like that symmetry. And I think, saying you're a 10 is a bit, big ego, maybe. I don't need that. I got two I's. That's how
but she brags about her name.
Yeah. My favorite misspelling of my name, once at a show in Milwaukee, someone brought me up as Kristin Lytie. And I was like, what?
That's great. That's really Kristin Lytie turned into Christian Lady.
Which would be a fantastic character, but I didn't prepare for it,
I mean, it seems like the next thing you should do is develop that character as your alter ego. Well, thanks for coming on. I'm super excited to have you here today. We have a bunch of actually a lot to talk about, especially breaking news. We had breaking news already relevant to Wisconsin in that ballot boxes are now illegal. But even more, literally within the last 10 minutes of me getting to the station and setting up and getting a notification on my phone, is that President Biden has signed an executive order to protect abortion access and urges Americans to vote, vote, vote. But it sounds like the executive action is mostly geared towards protecting women who are trying to go over state lines. But I haven't even had time to read the full scope of it. But that feels big, especially in a state right now where we are living under an 1849 abortion ban. So that could mean they can't restrict women from leaving Wisconsin to go to Illinois.
Yeah, I'm just happy I can still own property,
And have a credit card.
Yeah. You told me I can't swear on the show, so I will not dive into how I feel about this, but they've had decades to prepare for this. And this is the best we can do is protecting people as they cross state lines. So
I know.
Vote hard, I guess.
I know. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I think it will devolve quickly. And I also don't have full information about what this actually means. They're doing something besides asking for donations. Ugh, bad timing. All right. So even more, I guess what I thought already was kind of put a wrench in what we had planned to talk about, but I think is super important to talk about. And again, would love to hear, I kind of tweeted this out as the news came, that if anyone would like to call and air their grievances about, or I guess their favorability of this ruling. But as of this morning, the Wisconsin conservative-led Supreme Court ruled that absentee voter drop boxes are illegal under the state's constitution. And not only that, but they also ruled that absentee ballots delivered in person must be delivered by the voter and not a spouse, roommate. And it doesn't say anything about whether the state permits a voter's agent. And so it's basically to place an absentee ballot in the mail on the voter's behalf. I don't really know what that means compared to what it said before, but yeah, if you have thoughts on this, this is your time to air them. 844-967-2789. But to start, Kristin, how do you feel about this ruling?
It's just, I wish the Wisconsin Supreme Court and the National Supreme Court would just take as much vacation as the rest of our government, like just go to a lake for a while and stop putting out statements. Like this is just to squash people. This is to stop poor people from voting because, most people can't take a couple hours off on a Tuesday to go vote. So like, putting ballot boxes out helps even that out. And of course, they don't want poor people to vote because they don't have the same interests as them.
Well, it's poor people, it's old people, it's disabled people. It's, I guess the thing that I don't, because in the Bradley wrote, the one that we don't like as much, basically that the status requires absentee ballots to be returned to municipal clerks via the mail or in person. And she said an inanimate object such as a ballot drop box cannot be a municipal clerk, but neither can a mailbox. Like, is a mailbox not also an inanimate object? And so can't someone mail your absentee ballot for you? So the fact that both of those things, it's like, so we are okay with mailboxes. And are we okay with mailboxes because it takes longer for the ballots to get to the municipal clerk? Like, I don't understand. And the argument goes both ways, right? It goes towards people are like, why do we need a ballot box? You can just stick it in the mail. It's like, well, why do we not need a ballot box if it's basically exactly the same thing as the mail? Like, because a mail carrier delivers it? Like, I can't wrap my head around why this is the conspiracy that people have glommed onto as being like, if we fix this, the elections won't be rigged. Like, what mental gymnastics do you have to do to get there?
I don't think there is a sound reasoning. They're just grasping at straws for anything, right? Like to be able to point at, to say an election that happened almost 2 years ago was rigged. And if someone else mails your ballot, who's going to know? How are they going to enforce this? Like, it's ridiculous.
And I guess it's only if you are dropping the ballot off at a clerk's office, but are they checking IDs? Or are they just like, you can't turn in more than one? But here's the question. All right. So now that they won this one, what is going to happen if Democrats win the statewide election? So if Democrats win, Evers wins, whoever gets the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate beats Ron Johnson, what is going to be the reason then that Democrats cheated? It's like, all right, so you got this, you got the ballot boxes are now gone. And so that's like, does this actually accomplish anything except potentially, or I mean, not potentially, it certainly makes it harder to vote, but is that just keeping the wrong people from voting? So will that suffice them? My guess is no.
I think it suppresses the vote and it also gives credibility to this election rigging idea in the first place. So it like kind of activates their base to think that there was something happening.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, because it's not like Gableman can find anything. So at least there's.
Hey, spend another $1 million. Maybe you will, keep wasting our money.
I don't know. I mean, I saw my friend Dan Schaefer, who writes the Recombobulation Area. He said, what kind of election conspiracy message board, truth or nonsense, do you have to be buying into thinking that voting at a drop box at a public library is an affront to democracy? And I feel like that just really sums it up. Is like, this is what you're really scared about is the ballot boxes, which have been used in the past. Like, this is changing what was very normal until they lost.
Yeah, this isn't cutting edge technology,
Yeah, but you've done some voting stuff up there, right? As far as some changes to voting laws, or not voting laws, but like voting access in Green Bay.
Yeah, we worked with the League of Conservation Voters, and they needed money within the city budget to expand early voting hours up in Green Bay. So we all turned out to City Hall and made that happen, which was really exciting to see, like so many people from the community to come out and share different perspectives of like why this is so important and needed.
So when does early voting start for you? I guess in the next election for the primary. Don't know.
I should know that.
Well, no, because it's confusing, right? Like as someone who tried or has, I mean, I successfully have made content about get out the vote, but it's difficult to do. Even, I mean, federally across the nation, it's really hard to do. But even in the state, it's hard to do because certain cities had early voting. In the spring primary, certain places had drop boxes, and certain places didn't. And like the rules that change just by municipality or by county, and trying to give the most up-to-date, accurate information on voting in this state is really hard for exactly that reason. It's like, oh, early voting starts July 22nd, which I think maybe in Milwaukee it does, but that's not everywhere. And so you get like making stuff that ultimately, if you're not super thorough, you can give bad information out. And so it is, yeah. So I just, it's frustrating in this day and age to try to provide good information. I can only imagine what it's like to be a clerk these days.
Oh, it's probably a nightmare. Like all these people suddenly so interested in your work, like when you have just been like, you know, a government worker doing your thing, you know.
Just,
and it's so like it's really hard up here too because you have Green Bay and then you have all the surrounding municipalities who all have different voting hours, and so it's like people show up at Green Bay polling places, and then the poll workers there have to be like, oh no, this. I mean, even though your technical mailing address says Green Bay, you can't vote here.
Oh, interesting. Do you guys have the same? Quickly, we're going to break soon, but is there a lot of people who live around Green Bay? This happens in Milwaukee all the time. It's like, yeah, I live in Milwaukee, and they're like, you ask them to like write their address, and it's like, no, I live in Tosa, or I live in Cudahy, or Sherwood. Like, I imagine the same thing in Green Bay.
We're more of an idea, you know.
Yeah.
Lines.
All right, we're gonna go to a quick break, but when we come back, we're gonna change it up a little bit and talk about a little bit of a true crime that happened right in Kristin's backyard. And it's a little gruesome, so buckle up. All right, you're listening to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey and my co-host for the day, Kristin Lytie.
You're not there, not anywhere. You're not there, not anywhere. We are made of cosmic blood. We are made of wine.
Is that your band? Is that your friends?
It is. It's Holly and the Nice Lions.
That's a great name. Are they in Green Bay or where are they located?
Holly and Travis, the drummer, are in Green Bay, and then Steven, the bass player, is in Madison. So they're kind of a Wisconsin conglomerate.
Nice. Dig it. All right. I am back. This is As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey and my guest co-host for the day, Kristin Lytie. Kristin and Kristin, bringing to you on a Friday. Is it raining up there? It's raining down here.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess it's fine. It was beautiful all week, but all right. So you are into horror stories. You have a podcast called Bloody Mary, which is about horror movies. Are you into true crime?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I've not caught the true crime bug, but I know it is wildly popular.
Well, I do have a theory that, as women, there's one team specifically doing most of the murder. So, like, do we love it or are we studying? I'm not going to get got is what I'm saying.
It's like the woman who wrote the book of like how to kill your husband, because she then actually did kill her husband. So does this story that happened in Green Bay in February, does this fall under, what is the definition of true crime? And does this fall under it?
I mean, I guess the definition of true crime would just be something out of the ordinary that's kind of gruesome that people are weirdly fascinated by. And I would say under that definition, yes, this definitely does fall under that.
Yeah, because don't listen to true crime podcasts, but I was sent this article back, or this news story back in February by my fiance, and he was like, please never do this. And he was obviously joking, because back in February in Green Bay, Taylor Shaw Business, which is like a name just begging to be like none Shaw Business. So she gruesomely murdered her friend / sexual partner, and then mutilated his corpse. And I read a version of this when it first broke that had a lot of details. And I would say maybe if you are into true crime, you're used to reading stuff like this. But if you are not, if you have a weak stomach, maybe you want to come back in like 7 or 8 minutes, because this story is insane. And so what details, was this everywhere in Green Bay?
It was surprisingly not talked about. I was like, really? I think this is something we need to talk about, everyone.
Because so she was on a variety of drugs, including meth. But she also like gave herself an injection of like antidepressants and whatever. So they were having relations and using like strangling for foreplay. And then he died. He died from strangulation.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you want to take it from here? Of the other things that
yeah. Well, here's where young Taylor had a choice to make. Of course, we're all embarrassed when a sexual act goes wrong, but like, here's where she's going to have a hard time going with not guilty, because she should have at that moment called the police, an adult, anyone else, perhaps EMT, but she decided to go another route and, little ones leave the room, but she like cut off his head, cut up his body. And as police were escorting her away, she laughed and said, you'll have a hard time finding all the pieces. So like,
with a serrated bread knife, like it, and then she admitted everything she was arrested, because this part actually makes me incredibly sad. His mother, the dead person's mother, found his head in a bucket, and she admitted all of this when she was first arrested. But this week she pled not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, from what I read, it's not guilty for temporary insanity, or like, I don't know what defense they're going to use, because she's basically already admitted that she's did it. But I guess because you can't plead not guilty just because you didn't mean to, right? I'm not a lawyer, but this seems like, how did her lawyer say, yeah, we're going to plead not, like, this is not a good idea. Like, do not plead guilty. Take a plea deal.
Well, as someone who negotiates for a living, you want to come in high, right? So I think that's what she was trying to do. I will say in Wisconsin, we have a rich, rich history of turning people into meals and furniture, and that has been predominantly a male-led field. So in a certain way, it's sort of, yes, queen, break that glass ceiling. But, I don't think that she's
But
got
she hasn't.
to
She only did it once, apparently, so it's not quite on the serial killer stage. But yeah, this is. I love that you like no one's really talking about it in Green Bay. They're like, yeah, we're just gonna pretend that this hasn't happened.
I mean, that's that good old Catholic tactic of just shh, don't talk about it. It didn't happen. I have actually like talked about this on stage throughout the country, and people react wildly. Like some people who know about it, they'll just shout out. Yeah.
Can you tell us the joke?
Oh, I pretty much just did in our conversation, but
the yes queen.
Yeah, people love it. And then it's fun because the women get very rowdy and the men get very tense. So
understandably, it's like the what is it? Is it the praying mantis that kills its sexual partner after it's done? The female praying mantis is just like, yeah, I'm done with you. You've served your purpose.
It has a lot to teach us.
Well, I guess good luck to her. I don't see this ruling going in her favor, especially because she admitted it. But I would say if this is what true crime is like, I don't know if I don't. This is not a selling point. I think it's a little pleasy. But I guess you're right in that it's usually the other way around, isn't it? It's usually men murdering their wives. So I guess it is it's a little bit of a feminist story. All right. Well, when we come back, we'll take a break at the bottom of the hour. But when we come back, we're going to have a conversation about potentially, for once, some good judgment from our senior senator, Mr. Ron Johnson. This is As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey and my co-host for the day, Kristin Lytie. See you in a second.
Did you stand there all alone? Oh, I cannot explain what's going down. I can see you standing next to me.
Welcome back
In and out,
to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey. I'm here with my guest co-host for the day, Kristin Lytie, who's up in Green Bay. We were both enjoying the rain as it trickles down on this Friday. So I don't do this very often. I'm sure you don't either, but you may not agree with me. But I actually want to give Ron Johnson and his team some credit. I know, shocking, because this is a man who typically comes off as pretty callous in his sound bites and his opinions about how the world should be. He basically said that women should move. If they don't like the 1849 ban on abortion, they should just leave Wisconsin. He, when asked about paid leave and child care, he said it's not the government's job to raise your children and that you should be ready to have a child when you choose to have one, which seems very contradictory to the previous statement. But then he didn't really care about keeping the Oshkosh Corps jobs in Wisconsin. He accused Fauci of overhyping not only COVID-19, but AIDS. He denies climate change. He called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. And he really said the quiet part out loud when he downplayed the January 6th attacks and said that he wasn't threatened by the rioters who were there on January 6th, but he might have felt differently had it been led by Black Lives Matter. So this is a man who is not usually just says whatever he's going to say. And yet someone on his team had the foresight to pull this radio ad that they had planned to air that downplays gun violence in the wake. But when July 4th happened, they're like, yeah, maybe not. I think we have, it was never played, but it was leaked to a journalist and they posted it on Twitter. So I think we have the ad that never made the air.
The latest mass murder in America didn't involve guns. 53 people, including 5 children, were murdered by human traffickers because Joe Biden's open border policy is facilitating the multi-billion-dollar business model of some of the most evil people on the planet. Human, sex, and drug trafficking are out of control because of Democrat governance. They have to be stopped. I'm Ron Johnson, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Ron Johnson for Senate, Inc.
Thoughts, Kristin?
Oh gosh. Okay. So
Again,
part
you
of
can't
me,
swear.
no swearing. Part of me is like, oh, this is conservatives approaching the point. Like, yes, our immigration laws are bad. And like Biden and Obama actually deported more people than any other administration prior to that. So like, they should agree on that, I guess. I don't know. But like 2 things can be bad, right? Like gun violence is bad and broken immigration laws that leave people dead in a semi-trailer are also bad.
Also bad. Also bad.
Also bad. Yeah. So like, I don't know. The right wing always plays this game. Like when you try to talk about one thing being bad, then they're like, but what about this? And I'm like, yeah, both are bad. I don't know what to tell you. Like we could work on more. I work on like 6 issues a day. Like, and I'm not even a government official, you know?
We can do hard things.
Yeah, we can. And
Yeah,
like, I don't know if this was pulled out of respect for Highland Park victims or just, you know, he wants to re-edit it and wait to like launch this bomb, you know,
and just do it later when it, but it's like, that's a risky game because in current times, it feels like at any given weekend, there could be a mass shooting. But I guess this is what the vice president of sales at Katz Radio Group wrote. They need to pull the creative ASAP. If you listen to the spot, it talks about mass shootings, which obviously is not a good creative after this past weekend. And so I think it was specifically because
just after this past weekend, you know.
And so that's why it's like, all right, well, like maybe, you know, because it doesn't seem like a lot of times they care how it comes across. And so the fact that this time they were like, maybe too soon, maybe we don't drop this yet. But yeah, it's also like, when has he ever cared about this is like, when has he ever cared about immigrants dying at the border?
Never.
And so to play that angle is an interesting approach that all of a sudden playing on heartstrings of what it was a horrific. I mean, I think it was the largest death count of any immigrant, like any kind of, I don't even know how to, because basically it was a group of 53 women and children and immigrants trying to come to the US. And then it got like overturned. Like it was the vehicle itself got just, do you know more of this about the story?
I don't, but it's a pretty common scenario. I worked with No More Deaths in the desert for a couple weeks. And, people just have no idea what they're in for when they agree to travel over the border with a coyote or a guide. And they're pretty much at the mercy of whatever this person is proposing to them or wherever this person leaves them. I mean, my work with No More Deaths was to hike into the desert and find people who had been told it will be like a 2-day hike, when it's closer to like 3-4 days a week, possibly. And, look for people that just didn't have all the information and were in danger of dying. So, I mean, it's not uncommon that people get put in this situation. It's just the number is so large.
How long ago did you do that?
I was 28 at the time, so a while ago.
But also giving a timeline as far as how long this has been going on.
Oh, exactly. And that's like when they said, we're going to build a wall. Like, it was just like, if you've been on that terrain, it's, you can't even build a wall on that terrain. It's so, yeah.
Which part of the country were you in? Or which part of which border, I guess?
Arizona and Mexico.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ron Johnson, any other thoughts? Anything else you want to?
Well, the main thing, I'm actually surprised they pulled it because it's not like his campaign is based in a lot of fact. I don't know, his major talking point on his campaign is that he's going to lower gas prices, which how famously the senators all get together every year and set the price of gas. So
that is the part that I find hilarious is the amount of, every time I feel like I turn on the Twitter or any of the other places where I get my news, there is some article or podcast or piece of content that is explaining how gas prices are set. And it's just again and again and again of the government does not control gas prices. And it still works. Like that line still works on people. I mean, we were talking yesterday with our mutual friend, Greg, about the new Rebecca Clayfish has launched an ad with her in her minivan that she's had over 2,000 miles on, and talking about gas prices and how it was Biden. It was a double swing. It was a double punch. It was Biden and Evers' fault for how expensive gas is. But then it's also Tim Michaels because he's supported the gas tax in the past. And so, and the gas tax actually is something, right? Like that is a policy that gets voted on, but that is different. That is an add-on to wherever the actual price point of gas is.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And like after the invasion of Ukraine started, gas prices soared because those companies saw the ability to make a profit. And no one interjects on that and says like, that's wrong.
Well, they tried to, right? There was a bill for price gouging in Congress, and it didn't get passed. And I'm sure sometimes those things are more complicated, but again, I don't know why.
Are they?
I don't know. And I don't know why more Democrats aren't using that as in their campaigns. Like, why is that not made clearer? There was an opportunity to stop these massive gas companies from taking advantage of this situation and profiting so aggressively. And whether it is or not, like it may, even if it is more complicated, because I think there gets into things about the economics and, does it take away incentives to produce if it's, not just gas, but other companies. And so like you talk about corn in Wisconsin. And so if there's going to be this huge grain and corn crisis because of Ukraine, do you take away farmers' ability to take advantage of the situation and make the money in this windfall, right? And so I know that it gets more complicated than that, but as a strategy, I don't know why more Democrats aren't saying they voted against gas prices. Ron Johnson voted against price gouging for gas companies. And so I just don't know why that's not a larger talking point.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
All right. Well, the other thing that I thought was interesting is I think this was last week. He was going around with Nikki Haley because his big project is the Joseph Project, which actually seems like a pretty, it's basically for like inner city people to get workforce, like join the workforce and get skills and everything. So the organization itself seems great. But there was this quote that I thought was ironic that he said, aren't you just tired of all the anger and division? God, I am.
Aren't you tired of reporters following you around, asking you to talk to them? I am.
Calling you out when you're not actually on the phone and you're pretending to be on the phone.
Trying to open every door, but it's locked.
Yeah. So I don't know. The Ron Johnson stuff, it feels like easy. But there's so part of me.
Fun.
It is fun, but there's a part of me that feels like as unpopular as he is, he'll still win.
Oh yeah, he knows how to zero in on his base. And even though he looks like he always just woke up, he's always got the talking point they want,
That's a funny observation. That's a really funny observation. But no, I feel like, because what is it in the latest poll? There's still 14% of people who don't know enough about him to have a decision, like an opinion of him. Whenever
I'm gonna go beat my head against the wall real quick.
Yeah, whenever Marquette polling has that question, there's still, after 12 years, people who are like, don't know enough. But he is wildly unpopular, and yet there's a part of me that's like, I don't know. I think there's a world where Evers wins, and so does Ron Johnson.
I think that Tammy Baldwin and Ron Johnson just kind of represent Wisconsin right now as a whole.
Yeah. And
it's scary, but it's so accurate,
And that was how I originally came back to Wisconsin, because I had an idea for a documentary. It's funny to look back at now, because I certainly knew nothing about making documentaries. I just had an idea, and thank God I did, because now I'm back and now I have a radio show. So things turned around a little bit, but I'm here. But the realization, having lived on both coasts, but looking back at my home state and being like, it's really weird that one of the most progressive senators in the U.S. Senate and one of the most conservative come from the same state and have both been reelected multiple times. And it is, I think it sums up, and I don't know what is unique about either of them, because there was also overlap between people who voted for Scott Walker and Tammy Baldwin in 2018. Mm-hmm. And so there is that, when we talk about we're so divided, there is still a huge part, at least of the electorate here, that does go back and forth. Right. And so, because I don't think you get either of them without a notable percentage of people who, make up their mind based on the candidate still, and not just by the party.
Yeah, that's
all right. So when we come back, sad times, a staple of the exclusive company is closed. So we'll talk about that when we get back. As with Wisconsin, Kristin Lytie.
You can just
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey. I am joined by my friend Kristin Lytie as my co-host today, and lightening it up a little bit. I guess not really lightening it up because it's kind of sad. The Exclusive Company closed last weekend. They closed all of their locations, and I didn't live here for most of my adult life and recently moved back. But I understand that this was a institution.
Absolutely.
And so what made it so special?
Honestly, one of my first memories is like my aunt taking me to a midnight record release. And even I think I was like maybe like 5 or 6. And even then, like I knew this is cool. Like this is a cool place to be. And Time Bomb Tom Smith, who's the manager of the Exclusive Company, he also curated punk shows throughout Northeast Wisconsin for like, good God, probably like 40 years, 50 years. No, 40 years probably. He was just someone who like he made all us weirdos feel like we had a home and we had community and we had places to hear music we wanted to hear, read zines, find each other really. Going to shows at the Concert Cafe in Green Bay was kind of like my window to a world of activism and history, and a sense that I, as a woman, could do something in the world. So, it was just this place of endless opportunity. Like you could write zines, you could be in bands, you could meet people. It was just really not what was happening in mainstream society at the time. So I don't know who I would even be without the Exclusive Company. Like the band I had, Holly and the Nice Lions. That's Holly Trasty's band. She worked at the Exclusive Company for like 20 years. That's where I met her. And like some of my favorite memories are just going to the Exclusive Company on a Sunday afternoon and hanging out, talking about music. And like, friends would come in and out and we'd hang out, have coffee and chat. And it's just like this really beautiful space that, I love. I used to live across the street on Dousman, and I just spent a lot of time there and met a lot of really wonderful people.
Oh, that's a ringing endorsement. And so is it just time for him to hang it up, or just because people aren't buying records as much anymore? But I don't know enough a lot about the decision to close.
Yeah. So ultimately there were locations all over the state, and Mr. G passed away. He was the owner, and he was kind of like, I can't imagine the stores were making a lot of money with everything moving to digital formatting. So once he passed away, I think, the decision was made to close up shop. In Green Bay, there is a new space opening called the UFO Emporium, I think it is. And Time Bomb Tom, he's going to be working there. So we'll still see his face behind a record counter, which is
Great
good.
name.
Yeah.
Time Bomb Tom.
Oh, yeah.
That is, and I had this conversation. I think when this news first broke, we were having this conversation when I was still at WTNJ, and it's that nostalgic feeling of, oh, it's like a bookstore. It's like your favorite things. That whenever I go back to Madison, and it's the things that are like, oh, that closed. But in reality, it's then the everyday actions that we take to try to patronize, sorry, a place to keep it open, right? And making the extra effort and potentially the extra dollars that it's not necessarily the most convenient thing to buy or where to buy, because I'm totally guilty of that, right? The amount of times that I just jump on Amazon and that's the thing that I need, and I know I can get it in 2 days, versus let alone driving to another massive corporation to buy it from Target. It's like, heaven forbid I drive to Glendale, to the new Target up there, and get what I need. It's like, oh, I'm gonna just order it. And I know it's bad, and I would prefer to have the moral compass to not do that, because I am lucky enough to live in a place where things are readily available. But I know that I'm guilty of it, and so it's hard to watch these things close, but then also take the responsibility of knowing, well, was I spending enough money there to help keep it open?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's why, like, moving forward, I'm trying to spend my money at places like the Lion's Mouth bookstore here in Green Bay, who they like really curate a great independent section of authors.
Any other recommendations up there? I haven't spent a ton of time in Green Bay. Like I go up there for Packer games And that's kind of it. So I've never hung out on not a Packer Sunday. And so what are some of the other like great independent spots up there?
Yeah. When do I leave the house? Yeah. Oh, we got Spark House Vintage on Broadway. Love their stuff. Their owner is really awesome too. And then we have a lot of wonderful coffee shops like Luna, um, Daily Buzz, Kavarna, Voyagers, Bakehouse. Like those are some of my favorite places. And then yeah, Lion's Mouth is my favorite bookstore. I'm trying to think what else. We got this great place called Barnes and Noble. Have you heard? No, just kidding. Don't go there.
Truly, I feel like I don't even see Barnes and Nobles that much anymore either. I don't
Yeah,
even
we
know.
do still have one. Yeah.
I think there's one still down here too. I think there's one at like Mayfair. But again, I haven't. Yeah. So they've figured out how to survive.
Mhm.
And so, is there any comedy places up there that you are a regular at?
Yes, up in my neck of the woods, we have Fox Valley Comedy, and they put shows up in breweries throughout the Fox Valley region. And then we have Skyline Comedy, which is a club in Appleton. I just worked there last month featuring for Bobcat Goldthwait, which was super fun.
That's awesome. I actually have been to an open mic there once.
Oh,
The only open mic I've done since moving back to Wisconsin. I went up there, and it was the most friendly. Because like when I first when I was doing stand up, it was in New York, and the open mics there not so friendly. People basically are on their phones and looking at their own jokes, and then they get up and then they leave.
oh yeah. I came up
But
in Chicago, which is absolutely that vibe.
yeah, and so it's like, I got better things to do. But the supportive nature of doing an open mic at Skyline and feeling like, this it is a massive space. And so if once you're like, you feel like you're actually doing a show because there were so many people there, we're all other comics, and we're very generous with their laughter. And I was like, oh, this is like a very comfortable space to start learning how to tell jokes.
That's amazing. You know, it's been a priority of mine to try and get more women on stage in the area. So that's awesome to hear.
I will say that was my opening joke because I think I was about, I think like 15 or 16 people were ahead of me. And I was the only woman. And so I basically got up there and I go, really? Really? I'm the only woman here out of this many people. There's no other women. And so we got to recruit more of the funny ladies.
I agree.
All right. So when we come back after the bottom of the hour news, we're going to talk about the Wisconsin Supreme Court decision that we thought we were going to talk about before the ballot box, but try to explain a little bit more about what this means, what their ruling means for open records laws and why it kind of is a problem. But when we come back, we'll talk about that. This is As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey and my co-host for the day, Kristin Lytie. came down this week. No, was it this week or I think it was this week or last week this came out, but it was before the ballot box decision that came down this morning. It was the Wisconsin Supreme Court case that we thought we were going to talk about because they made a significant change to the open records law, which it was this week. It was July 6th. And this is one of those specialty, wheelhouse stories that I feel like with As Goes Wisconsin is primed to explain, because on its face, you're like, oh, why do I care? But it does affect you. I guess I've personally never had an open records request. Have you?
Having filed one?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot.
A lot of
I've
them.
done, with federal court to find out where ICE raids happened. I've done them with school districts to find out who's resigning. Like, it's a pretty useful tool that I've used a lot over the decades.
We should actually, maybe before we dive into it, give a little bit more background on the work that you do besides being a stand-up, because we haven't even talked about it yet. So giving a little bit more context of like why you've had so much experience in and around government and having to make these kinds of requests.
Oh, sure. So I've been a union organizer for the past 15 years. I started in Chicago working for the United Food and Commercial Workers. We represent like packing houses and retail, which is why I was very interested. We had a community coalition that was interested in ICE raids because, it caused havoc for so many of our members' lives. So that was one instance, and we wanted to know what was happening. And then now in my current role, I'm a director with the Wisconsin Education Association Council Region 3, which is such a mouthful. We're the teachers union, So I work with about 24 different districts throughout the area, and each district has their own independent local union. So my role is to advise and help plan campaigns, help local members achieve their goals, and I do some representation. So information requests would look like, anything from trying to figure out the actual list of who is working in the district, who's retiring, who's resigning. And it can go into like, if disciplinary actions are taken against a member, we could ask for, what documents were created in the search to find and come to this conclusion.
Got it. All right. Well, that's a very thorough explanation. And so knowing that, so my understanding of what happened in this case is that basically they're limiting when people who make a lawsuit over an open records request can recover attorney's fees. And so basically it says if you request, in the case that actually made it to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, it was actually here in Waukesha, and it was a group who had made a request of the city for certain documents. And there was one document that they didn't release right away. And the city had said it was because of their negotiations and they couldn't be compromised. And then the group that had made the request filed a lawsuit. 2 days later, they got access to the document that they requested. But then they didn't get, they thought they were entitled to attorney fees to reimburse themselves for the lawsuit that they had filed. And this made it, first there was one judge that said nope, then there was an appeals court that said yep, and then it made it to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and they ultimately this week said no. And basically saying that you have to have a judge, like some judicially sanctioned change in the parties' relationship in order to be to qualify for getting your attorney fees reimbursed. And so what I understand of why this is, one, it's a huge change from what's been the standard, is it also now just potentially deters people from making the request, or at least from having a lawsuit to get the things that they requested. Is that how you understand it?
Yes. And there are a lot of problems with FOIA as it exists now, because there's a lot of gray area.
What is FOIA?
The Freedom of Information Act.
Oh, there you go. I didn't know there was an acronym for it.
Oh, there's an acronym for everything, baby. Yeah. But as it exists now, like if I'm going to an employer and, like a public employer to ask for records, they can say, basically, if they don't want to do it, they don't have to. They can get around it, right? They could say, oh, we're going to charge you for the cost of getting this information, and that's going to cost Diane over in HR. That's like 10 hours, and she makes $8,000 an hour. So if you want this information, it's going to cost you $1 million. Do you have $1 million? Oh, so sorry. We can't do it. So they will come up with ways.
And that's
to get
legal.
around it. Oh yeah, it's absolutely legal if they want to do that. I had one district I was working with say that we needed to pay them $500 or something like that to acquire the list of retirees. I'm like, I'll just go look in your board minutes because it's there. So really it depends on how difficult people want to be. So I could see in some instances you would need legal help to try and get information if they don't want to cooperate willingly. Because essentially like FOIA is on the books, but like to hold them to it, it's all about that enforcement piece.
Yeah, this is what this case. So it didn't actually change the ability to make the request. It's more about the enforcement of, well, now you're potentially risking or the group that you're a part of is risking the financial responsibility of trying to enforce the request.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's just overall, the conversation we've seen to squash democracy, right? Like they don't want you to vote. They want you to have information. Shh, just don't worry about it,
Yeah. And that's why I was, because often when it seems like we're dealing with judges or justices, whether it's now federally, but also for a while now in this state. And the thing with this state is it is more political because our Wisconsin Supreme Court is elected, which is not how the U.S. Supreme Court, they get their jobs, and they are allowed to take political campaign money. And so while they were supposed to be nonpartisan and they were supposed to make rulings based on the actual law, it's very easy to track who is responsible for trying to get them reelected every 10 years. And so, but this, I don't, who benefits in this situation? It kind of comes back to always like follow the money. Like where does who is behind this being a good idea? And you may know more about this than I do, but on its face, I don't know why this is who's the winner in this game.
I think bad actors are because they're never going to be found out.
But is that who's behind? I mean, but I'm saying I think more of who's influencing a court to rule this way. Like what party would be invested in this being the outcome at that like high level? Does that not make sense?
I mean, I've just come to feel lately like our government is just a sharecropper system where we pay their salary and for their healthcare and their fancy vacations. So like, I don't feel like it's one party over the other particularly, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, sometimes it feels a little bit more obvious, but this one seems like a big deal. And for people who are, very protective of the public's ability to have access to this kind of information, I don't know why you would not want to continue that. But we have a caller. Our first caller. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, let the caller. Yeah,
that's caller. We have Mark. Mark, what do you think?
Thanks so much. Well, I think that this is a wrong-headed decision. That's wrong because I'm familiar with. Well, I haven't filed them myself. I have friends that have filed them on behalf of the union back in the days when we actually had the union, the state employees union, because I was a steward in that union. That it is, and recently they've been trying to get the information on the vacancies. The state has just been talking about the huge number of vacancies there are in public service positions, partially because of the demonization of public, of people who choose public service as a career, and the low pay. I mean, that the pay is not kept up. Here you're hiring professionals. I was an accountant. I mean, that worked at the DNR. You don't think there's somebody who works at the DNR being an accountant, but the DNR has accountants too. That is, it's going to make it more expensive because the unions, what is left of the skeleton that is left of the unions now if they want to get information from the state, they got to, pony up the funds to get it, and the state can drag its feet and say we're not going to give that to you. Whereas if it's somebody like Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, the state would probably, our legislature would be screaming bloody murder if the state tried to drag the feet on that. But they'd make damn sure that Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty received their, whatever money they had to invest in filing for that open records request. I mean, that it is that, what we've got a bought and paid for Supreme Court because they don't even have to file ethics anymore. Or any kind of code of ethics. The code of ethics was written by Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, for God's sake.
Yep, that is. I was just listening to Rick Essenberg on. Thanks so much for the call, Mark. That was really good insight. And I was listening to the president and founder of Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. He was responding to today's ruling on one of the radio stations. But yeah, I mean, I think this is probably a good time to remind everyone that there is another election for a Wisconsin Supreme Court position next year, spring 2023. It's going to be a very, very important election. Mark your calendars now because it is an opportunity to not have this be a bought and paid for Wisconsin Supreme Court. All right, when we come back, we're going to keep talking about where unions are today. Now that we're on the topic, let's go with that. And so between Mark and Kristin, talk about what happened while I was not living in Wisconsin to our unions. All right, this is Ask Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey.
Necessary to help you successfully evaluate, acquire, and maintain any size property and maximize a property's potential value. Whether it's the first time you are purchasing a house or managing your next apartment complex, we are here to reach your real estate goals. Start investing now. We take the headache, you keep the profit. Contact us at 262-232-8738 or visit us at smartassetrealty.com. Te habla español. Come on down to Mary Jane's on Main in downtown Waukesha. We are all things hemp, edibles, flowers, chocolate, Delta 8, 10, B, and O. We also have clothing, shoes, jewelry, toiletries, but most importantly, education. Come into the store. Let me educate you on all things hemp. Whether you smoke it or wear it, come and get it at Mary Jane's on Main. Or you can see us every Saturday at the farmer's market. I'm Mary, and let me show you how hemp can help you.
WAUK and the Shaw are the new kids on the radio block, and that block happens to be on Wisconsin Ave, Waukesha. Now is a great time to advertise locally with 540 AM and the Shaw 101 FM. While the ads are inexpensive and the audience is rapidly growing. Sponsorships available for This Week in Waukesha, Raised in the Shaw, or live local music on the weekends. Spring packages starting at just $495 a month. Get started today by emailing info@waukradio.com.
I was waiting for a crosstown train in the London Underground when it struck me. That I've been waiting since birth to find a love.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey. So we're going to keep the conversation going and maybe do more of a little bit of a history lesson. As I said, I was gone from 2003 to 2020, and I lived outside of Wisconsin. And I think I missed some pretty important years. So you left for a little while too, though, Kristin. I'm here with Kristin Lytie, who's my co-host for the day, who is from Green Bay, but then you spent some time in Chicago.
I did. I was in Chicago from 2008 to 2018.
Okay, so you were gone for a good clip of time too.
Mhm.
And technically, I guess you were gone during the same kind of tumultuous tide change.
Yeah, I
From
left
the
right when
Wisconsin we
it
grew
was
up in.
starting.
Kind of what happened in under the Walker years.
Yeah, 2008, I had graduated college because I did actually went to college later in life after my father had an accident in his mill. He almost died in an explosion there. And then watching the way that the gas company and the mill responded to him really politicized me. And that's what made me start wanting to work in the labor movement. So I went to college, and when I graduated college, Green Bay was working on passing an English only ordinance, and the state was trying to pass an amendment to ban gay marriage. And I campaigned really hard against both those things. And I left Wisconsin with a lot of hate in my heart and feeling really let down that people were so, anti-other, like we should be bonded and working together and not trying to pass laws to separate each other. It was really heavy heart made me leave. And then 2011, Act 10 rolls out, which is essentially Scott Walker. I mean, really the Koch brothers' plan to destroy public sector unions. And it was so disappointing because AFSCME started in Wisconsin, like we're the home of public sector unionism. So essentially what Act 10 did is made it illegal for unions to negotiate anything other than a CPI increase to wages. And it also restricts things like grievances. I work for the teachers union, so we can only file grievances in regard to discipline, termination, and health and safety concerns. When in the past, there had been a whole buffet of issues we could negotiate over and talk about. Let's see, what else did Act 10 do? It essentially just squashed unionism in Wisconsin.
Yeah. And so you left and then you came back, and now, as we know, because we were just talking about it, still a union organizer. So what is it like these days to try to be a union organizer in Wisconsin, besides what I imagine is to be very frustrating, but in more detail, what does that look like now?
So I will tell you, I just said all these terrible things, right? But the flip side of that is there's also opportunity I see, because there's two models of unionism. There's service model unionism and there's organizing model unionism. Service model is the idea that you have a very formalized structure. You pay me as a staff person. We have a contract. If there's a problem, you call me and I am like your union concierge, and I go in and I fix it. And, everything's fixed through the power of this contract. And there's not a lot of emphasis on educating members and asking members to be part of the process. So the main reason I came back is because Wisconsin now has this opportunity to flip to organizing model unionism, in which we educate, empower, and engage members to take action. So in Wisconsin, we don't have contracts. Everything that we win with the unions that I've worked with, we've won because we show up with people power and we make bosses realize this is what everybody wants. So through meet and confer sessions, we're able to make wins on handbook policy and just change the culture within the workplace. It's not formally legally enshrined in a contract, but through traditional means of union power, you can still make change. And that to me is very exciting.
That is really exciting. And that is more of it. That's like political organizing, right? So it's a lot of sharing information, explaining things, one-on-one conversations, building momentum, building consensus, and more that approach than, well, this is just here for you.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And that's still perfectly that part of it, organizing unionism has not been legally hit. It just comes down to the will of the people and the talent of the said organizers, right?
Exactly. You just got to keep pushing back. And Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of possibility in that moment. And when I'm explaining that to educators, like I just see a light go off in their eyes. Like they realize they do have agency and they do have a way to make change because, like, for the past decade, we've been the state's punching bag for everything. So this has been exciting and invigorating for a lot of folks.
Well, that's great. And so you're very confident and happy with your decision to move back. Is there a part of you that's like thinks about Chicago?
I mean, when I visit Chicago, sometimes Chicago will be flirty. Like I'll find parking right in front of where I'm going for
Ooh,
free. And I'm like,
what?
okay, calm down, Chicago. You're not getting me back. But I am very happy to be home. It's just so much easier to be a person here.
I agree. As someone who left and didn't think I was going to come back, I think that's one of the first things when we first met. We were in Green Bay. We kind of said the same thing. It's like, I didn't think I was coming back, but I am very happy to be back despite frustrations. But at least to be in motion to try to, whether it's organize or educate or create content about, to try to capture people before they just become completely apathetic about things, is motivating.
Yeah. And Chicago is like so liberal. It actually got kind of boring. I'm like, if you don't get hate mail, how do you know you're doing anything? I don't know.
Like, I can't be an anarchist here. This is boring. All right. So when we come back, I actually want to keep talking about unions. I want to kind of push back on like what I think of the objections that pop up and see how you usually handle those or respond to those. But yeah, so we'll keep that going after the bottom of the hour. This is As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey with my co-host Kristin Lytie.
101 FM, WAUK 540 AM.
Bringing us back nice and easy, Evan, with this music. We're gonna pour myself some tea and calm down after all this crazy news. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey. I am joined by Kristin Lytie, union organizer and comedian. How often do you meet people who have those two titles?
There's one other person I know in the country, and that's Nato Green in San Francisco.
All right. Yeah, it's a little bit of a unicorn, I would imagine. Do you guys have similar jokes?
No, surprisingly not. He does work with W. Kamau Bell quite a bit. And
I love him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's great. Well, we are speaking of you being a union organizer. I wanted how you live in a state where unions were gutted, but I feel like the common objections or criticisms of unions, and I'd love to hear as an organizer how you typically respond to them if you come up against them in a debate. And so at least the ones I typically hear about is, forcing people to pay dues or fees that they don't want to pay because they don't feel like they get enough out of the union and that they don't feel like they should have to pay those.
Yeah. And, when we had closed shops, meaning that everyone was in the union no matter what, we did hear that quite a bit. But union dues are just your fee that you pitch in a little bit so we can run as an organization, really. I mean, that's paying my salary so you can have staff, so you can have someone to call when you're in a panic, or it's also so that we can pay for lawyers to help us with our cases. We can pay for organizers. We can put money into political campaigns that help public education. I mean, we are not like... That was the big problem when the Supreme Court decision came out that said corporations can give just as much money and so can unions. And it's like, well, we don't have buckets of money. We run on very tight budgets. Mm-hmm. And, that's not to say that there are some unions out there that do put way too much money into their leadership and give union
and give a lot of money to campaigns still. I mean, I don't think it's quite as much as it used to be because
it's nowhere near as much as a corporation would give. But most unions, like the union I work for, if you don't want to contribute to political funds, you can get that $25 back a year. I mean, that's it. That's out of all your dues. That's what's going to political campaigns. But it's that idea of like everybody giving a little bit so we can collectively advocate together.
Got it.
And like you pay for insurance, right? You pay for insurance on your house, your car. Why not for your profession?
Very good point. All right. So then the big one, I think, you hear from a lot of people, whether they've worked in a union or they've been a employer or just hearsay of how their spouse or whatever, is that in union shops, it is hard to reward good workers in order to promote them. And it's also very hard to lay off bad ones. And so how do you typically approach this conversation when people say that's what's wrong with unions is lazy, bad employees get protected?
Yeah, we get that a lot. I mean, ultimately, it's management's decision whether to hire or fire someone. So like to say that the union has power in making that decision is kind of silly. But the union is there to protect the process and make sure everyone gets a fair shake. So it might look like we're protecting bad employees, but actually that's protecting the process. So that employee is able to show exactly what went wrong or what happened so that you would have that opportunity in the future too, should you need it.
All right. So I guess that's different. I maybe this is just a bad rumor or assumption is that there's just there has to be a certain amount of documentation or like the obstacles in place to protect like a bad, because we're talking about teachers unions, like a bad teacher. And so why, like where does that presumption come from as far as how bad teachers get protected and you can't fire them? Like, why is that such a assumption on so many people's part?
Well, I think it's actually a national assumption, and it's just one of the many tools that union busters use. So I wouldn't say it's particular to teachers. You know, there's like a full list of how they try to indoctrinate people to act against their own best interests.
Yeah.
I mean, one is definitely the money. That's the most prevalent. It's like, when does an employer ever care about how you spend your money? But suddenly when you're talking about forming or joining a union, then it's, oh my gosh, your money. Like, no.
Yeah. So that's how, I mean, I guess I could probably list off other ones, but I always feel like those are the big ones. So in obviously you have a point of view on this because this is your work, but so most of the objections that you end up hearing are not real in the sense that they're not something that the unions are actually dealing with so much as they are fabrications from the people who don't want groups of people to unionize.
I would say so. Because honestly, like to join WEAC, I believe each local has their own set dues, but it's roughly $50 to $60 a month, which is like $13 a week. When I was working
how much I spent on all my streaming services.
Right. And when I was working with retail workers in Chicago, they paid more in dues. So to hear that, like, oh, it's just too much money is kind of like, okay, well, sure.
All right. Well, then do you feel, because I've had this, I feel like we're getting more headlines and news stories, both in Wisconsin, but also nationwide, of more and more groups trying to unionize and also being successful. So in Milwaukee, we have Collectivo, which actually also they have Chicago locations, which is the coffee shops that last year, despite I think Collectivo's management has often presented as pretty liberal and progressive, but they
boss is a boss.
Yeah, they very much did not want their workers to unionize, and I think they're still weirdly fighting it, or like, so that's happening. More recently in Milwaukee, the Pabst Theater Group, which is like Riverside, Pabst Theater. What else do they own? I think they own a couple more places, but their workers decided to unionize. And I think there's been less, they did push it to a vote, and then the vote went through. And I think Gary Witt and the management there is not being as obstructionist as Collectivo, but more famously is Amazon and Starbucks. And I've thought about this because we've seen, certainly in our lifetime, maybe it started even before you were born, the decline of unions. But with the labor shortage that we've had coming out of COVID, there's been more and more stories about groups of people starting to unionize. So do you feel like unions are making a comeback?
I do. Because if you look at when unions really started to decline in this country, it's when we built a very strong middle class and people felt they had a lot to lose. And then there was also the Red Scares to kind of put the kibosh on any, radical union organizing. And I think we've reached a point in our economy where people don't have much to lose and they're working 2, 3, 4 jobs. People are working full time, still living in poverty. People are tied to their employer for healthcare, which isn't any good. Most employers try to keep people at part-time wages so that they don't have to provide benefits. And we're seeing this just collapse, and people need something. So I think unions do provide that hope because, my God, what else are we going to do?
Yeah. And it also seems like there's not as much to lose, but there's also the environment in which, say who's like the most anti-union, like Menards, John Menard, right, is notoriously like he'd rather shut his place down than let his workers unionize. And but like that, if he continues to lose workers and people quit and they go to other home improvement stores, does that, like, it's one thing to say it and another thing to get to the point where you're like, I don't have enough people to work. And so how much is it also just because of the environment of people have more, I don't know if it's because people have more options now, but especially service industry, public sector, like jobs that historically are hard, either because they're hard because there's physical labor involved. There is, if you're a teacher, having to deal with parents involved, all these things, and they also don't pay well. And so people are leaving. I mean, teachers, like droves of teachers have just quit And this was already in Wisconsin when we were like hitting a cliff of having a teacher shortage. And now I'm sure we've only sped that up more. And so,
absolutely.
yeah. And so it's like it's one thing that there's not as much to lose, but it's another thing just because there is a political power almost because declining populations and other work options. And how much have you seen that play into, a growing movement?
Yeah. I mean, I think, the economy of work is built on a promise that if I come in and I give you my time, you will take care of me and I will feel a sense of loyalty, right? And that's absolutely been disregarded. I mean, most employers are at will, so they can fire you whenever they want. We've seen a huge influx of just-in-time management styles, meaning you'll be on call to work at a grocery store, so it's like making people scrounge for shifts. And I think people have just realized they want and they demand better, especially like the younger generation, Gen Z, coming in and seeing all this for the mess it is and pointing it out. Like, I love them. I think they're amazing. I host.
You spend any time on TikTok, you're like constantly impressed by 19-year-olds who are much smarter than I am.
But I actually host I host Zoom sessions for people who reach out to me on Twitter who are interested in forming a union, because it's a it's a purposely suppressed history, because no matter how progressive your boss is, they don't want to deal with a union. That's giving up power, giving up money, decision making. There's no boss in the world, I think, that would be like, yeah, start a union. That's great. So I think it's really important to teach as many people as we can how you do this work and how you get to elections and how you build a first contract, because it's truly democratizing your workplace.
What industries do you think are ripe for unionizing? Like who maybe historically haven't been, but you feel like, oh, like this, it would make a lot of sense if they started to have collective power.
Well, I think the movement is spot on in going after Amazon, Walmart, Target, your large multinational corporations that are service work, because service work can't be exported. You need it. I believe all work has value, but people want to somehow discredit it and say that it's for teenagers and the elderly, but it still needs to be done. And these corporations are making billions of dollars. And they're sucking the wealth out of our communities because they get incentives from developers to open their stores. So not only are they undercutting their employees, they're not paying their fair share of taxes, and they're getting money just to open the store. So I really feel like the labor movement is moving in the right direction. Like, that's what I was advocating for 15 years ago. And people would just like openly laugh at me about like $15 an hour minimum wage. And now all these companies want to like pat themselves on the back. Like, we're doing it. I'm like, yeah, that's what we were asking for 10 years ago. So, okay.
Keep up. That's the thing I feel like people often forget, is that one of the biggest welfare recipient makers is Walmart. And that because they keep people at part-time, because they don't have benefits. So a lot of people who are working and who actually would like to work more are suppressed, and thus then rely on the government and subsidies from like different programs, whether it's SNAP or Badger Care, or where, depending on where you live. And so I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily make that connection of, well, if you don't pay people, then they're going to rely on the government like welfare programs that you also say that you hate so much. So then
absolutely
be in favor of, if you're going to think that you're entitled to have a business, your business needs to be able to afford to pay people a living wage.
Absolutely. And the millions to billions of dollars they get in tax incentives just to open their doors is mind blowing. That's money that should be going to blighted communities.
Yeah. Foxconn.
I could talk about that all day. Those missing ballots are with the Foxconn jobs. That's where
I walk by in downtown Milwaukee. There's just an empty, like a Foxconn building that still has the logo out in the front. And I walk by and I'm like, is there anyone in there? But
damn,
they love me. All right. Well, we are almost at the end of the show. And so when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about Green Bay and some of the good and the bad, because you guys got actually a pretty good score for the human rights campaign. And so
we did.
I would love to hear more about good news. Let's end on a high note. All right. When we come back, this is As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey.
What you been paying? 'Cause I was walking in a dream. What you mean?
Welcome back, As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey. We have made it to the last segment of the last show of this week, the first week of As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristin Brey, and I have been joined for the last 2 hours, or almost 2 hours, by Kristin Lytie, who is a union organizer and a comedian, and lives in Green Bay. And you actually have some good news. I mean, earlier in today's show, we were talking about how when you were basically leaving Wisconsin was when there was a measure on the ballot to make gay marriage illegal, to ban it. But now in places like Green Bay, it seems like there's been a lot of progress. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that story?
Yeah, so I was at a Green Bay City Council meeting. Oh man, it was only a week ago, but the Human Rights Campaign came in and gave a presentation on the scorecard that they give for cities. And it's essentially based on things like how accessible employment, housing, public accommodations, non-discrimination in city employment, transgender inclusive healthcare benefits. They kind of like look at the city very holistically and determine how safe it is for the LGBTQ community to live there. And then they give us a number score and we ranked 84, which, cities like Madison and Milwaukee, I think they're more like 100. But given the fact that we were trying to, ban gay marriage 12 years ago. Yeah, not too long ago. This feels good. This feels like a great improvement.
That is a huge improvement. I think it'd be interesting if Milwaukee and Madison are hundreds. It feels like that should be one of those scores where no one gets 100 because there's probably always room for improvement.
Yeah. And essentially like this number, you want it to be high because, different companies coming to the area, they look at things like this because it's a nice thing for them to tout as to why they picked a city. So it's also like everything about money.
Yeah. Does that number feel true as far as someone who lives there, as far as the open-mindedness, welcomeness, does that feel like the vibe up there?
Well, I think in Green Bay, we have a lot of that split dynamic, Tammy Baldwin, Ron Johnson feel.
It's very purple up there.
Yeah, very purple. The fact that we Jill Underly won the state superintendent race was fantastic, and we turned Brown County blue in that election. But there's still, like at the same meeting, they wanted to talk about how it hurts people's religious freedoms to have to look at the pride flag when City Hall flies it. So, like, yeah, we're 84, but there's still a lot of work in that last 16 points,
What, say it again? What was their argument?
It infringes upon my religious freedoms to have to acknowledge that gay people exist. That's essentially the argument.
So yeah, 84. There's still ways to go.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I think we need to highlight those stories as much as we have the bad stories of things that don't feel like they're going well, but also celebrate progress and being inclusive and all of those things. And so I think that's a great story. Now, I want to, in the last couple of minutes that we have, talk a little bit more about your podcast. Yeah. So tell us more about what you spend your time talking about.
Yeah, so I love horror movies. Essentially, I started this podcast just to trick people into talking to me about them. But I love horror because I feel like it's such a great device for metaphor and talking about what's happening in current events with a lens of, like the socioeconomic surroundings of our world. So what I do is...
That's interesting because I feel like I never saw horror movies like that until I saw Get Out. But you're saying that many more horror films previous were similar in making political statements through the metaphor.
Yes.
No,
I think it's always been that way.
I didn't know that was part of, maybe I should get more into horror films because that's never been my thing. But tell me more. Okay.
Definitely. Well, I've always loved horror as a kid, and because it felt kind of like saucy and off limits and something I wanted to learn more about. But I just love the core idea of every horror movie is you better work together or you're not going to make it, which I feel like is just a great theme to live by, So I always have a guest on and we talk about their favorite horror movie and what it means to them personally, like where they were in their life when they discovered it, the themes in it, what it means to them as a person, and, their favorite parts and everything like that. So I've had like college professors on. Had a dominatrix on once, lots of comedians, a really fun mix of people. And I do keep it to, women and female identified people, just because the horror community is overrun by dudes. We need a little space.
What's not run by dudes? I feel like I now that I'm in talk radio, it's like, oh, there's not a lot of women here. When I worked in tech, it's like, oh, there's not a lot of women here. Comedy, not a lot of women here.
Yeah, where are the women?
Where are the women? What are you guys doing? What are you interested in? The show is called Bloody Mary. It can be found where?
What?
Where can people find the show?
Oh yeah, we're on iTunes, SoundCloud. We're like it's anything but just me. But yeah, anywhere you find a major podcast, we'll be there.
And then, have you done the Bloody Mary challenge? Have you ever looked in the mirror, said Bloody Mary 3 times, and obviously you lived to tell about it? But were you brave enough to do that? Oh, Kristin, did you freeze?
Kristin.
Oh, Kristin, we were doing so well.
I was really
excited for that answer.
Oh my goodness. I think she did it.
Did we just curse her with a Bloody Mary?
Oh my goodness.
By asking that question, she's now disappeared.
Oh,
that is either one hell of a trick or maybe it's just bad Wi-Fi.
We're going to cross our fingers. She'll be back,
She
right?
might pop up. We got 2.5 minutes left in the show. But that's such a bummer. I really wanted to hear the answer to that question.
Me too.
We were doing
I'm
so well.
now.
I've been so impressed by the ability with technology and that we can do this radio show with Evans and Madison right now. I am in Milwaukee. Kristin, who I think unfroze and is about to join the stream again.
Oh, we're so fortunate. Oh my goodness. Thank
Sorry
you.
about that. My power went out.
Well, I think it was because my question was going to be, and we only have a couple minutes. Have you ever done the Bloody Mary challenge of when you look in the mirror and you say Bloody Mary 3 times, and right as I asked you that question, you disappeared, and so I thought I cursed you.
I'm glad to not be cursed. Happy to be here. No, I have never done that because even though I am agnostic. I'm still real superstitious, you know.
So you were like, I'm not going to risk it. Not worth it.
Nope.
I think I've done it as a kid, but I don't know. All right. Well, we are getting to the end of the show. And since we got you back, find Bloody Mary anywhere you find podcasts. But where else can people find you on social media and some of your upcoming shows?
Oh, yeah. So you can find me at KristinLytie.com is my website with all my dates, on Twitter and Instagram at Kristin Lytie. And if you want beautiful scenic pictures, Instagram. If you want political ranting, Twitter. And yeah, I'll be going all over the Midwest in August. I take July off, but in August, I will be in Iowa, Nebraska, Indiana, and the 27th of August, I'll be in Milwaukee. So come on out.
Come to Milwaukee. Where in Milwaukee?
It's Don't Tell Comedy, so it's a surprise.
Ooh, Don't Tell Comedy. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm sure
it's
I'll
been a
have you back
blast.
on soon. But yeah, one of my first guests this week. I'm so happy that you could join me.
I'm honored.
Thank you so much, Kristin Lytie. Definitely check out her comedy. Thank you so much for sticking with me this week or today or however long you've been listening today. This has been a great first week. I'm so excited for everything to come and everything we have planned for this show and for this station. And that's it.
That's it. That was fun, you guys. I'm glad I got the board today.
Yay. I can't believe my power went out at the
Yeah,
end.
that's-
Power? I thought it was your Wi-Fi.
I mean,
So your
it's awfully
power, your
dark
whole
in there.
power just went
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. I'm on a hotspot on my phone.
And you still made it back. That is epic.
Oh, that's really funny. Yeah, you made it back. It actually was kind of perfect timing
Oh, that's
to
so
ask,
funny.
to ask the Bloody Mary question, and then you disappear. It's like, oh, we just invoked her name,
It was a
and
good
now
bit.
she's gone.
Yeah. I'll be sending you, Kristin, the episode, shortly here.
Okay.
I have the embed codes, so you can get it over to Miss
Perfect.
Lytie here. We are in good shape. Thank you guys so
Perfect.
much.
Okay, yeah. So I'll
Thank you.
as I post everything, I'll tag you. But we're still working out the checklist and the post production, getting everything tagged. But this was so fun. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Super fun. Thank you
All
for
right,
everything.
talk soon.